Hey everyone, welcome to Critical Communication and Employee Feedback in Times of Change. We'll give just a couple minutes for people to join the room. Okay, if you're just joining us, this is a webinar on critical communication and employee feedback during times of change. Before we jump in, I just wanted to give a quick background about myself. My name is Vivek. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Weave. We use conversational AI technologies to understand employee feedback at scale. As we all know, we are in the new normal. There's this implicit understanding among senior leaders now that employees have to feel safe, heard, and supported. And in fact, since COVID-19, 95% of senior leaders are now demonstrating a sincere interest in employee well-being and safety. And this is up from about 60% when we were looking at 2019 and prior. So we see a large changes happen in terms of leadership culture, in terms of how it relates to employee needs and understanding the importance of those employee needs on the bottom line. We also are seeing a forced transformation in the way that we work. We know that work from home is here to stay for many of us. And even for those that are going back to the office, a lot of those environments are going to become flex work. What that means is the transformation that we're currently undergoing is something that has to work. We don't really have a choice beyond it. What all this means is that there is this immediate need for a continuous, engaging, and two-way dialogue between employees and leadership, rather than the traditional style where we have checkpoints that happen across certain periods of the employee life cycle, creating a relationship where there's an ongoing conversation. So the question becomes, how do we project a sense of competence and empowerment? And it really breaks into three core pieces. First is building a culture of empathy and of understanding. Second is that we are understanding and engaging with every employee and understanding what issues and needs are on the ground level. And finally is achieving a very rapid issue to action cycle. What we mean by that is the time it takes from understanding an employee's need to getting around to taking an action on it, whether that action is actually resolving the employee's need, or even if it's just to say, hey, we heard you, and this is what's happening next in the process. So let's tackle that first question. How do we create a culture of empathy and trust? What does that actually mean behind the platitudes? So to back up, trust itself is defined as three things by the trust barometer by Edelman. First is competence, which is how well do you do things. Voice, which is are you giving the other a chance to speak up and have their thoughts be heard. And ethics, meaning are you perceived to be doing the right thing by the other party. In other words, empathy itself is not a program. It's a value that has to permeate from the leadership level into your HR, into your management, to your operational leaders, where it's a clear narrative and a unified voice. Another way of putting it is empathy itself is the foundation of trust. So then what does it tangibly mean to demonstrate empathy rather than just spouting it as a value in our organizations? We've broken it down into four major pieces. First is that someone has cared enough to ask me for my thoughts. They are proactively checking in with me. They're making the time and their own resources available in order to indicate that they care. Second is that that person has understood my thoughts, and most importantly, they've demonstrated that they've actually understood it. And some ways of doing this are by repeating your understanding to employees of the feedback or issues that they're relaying to you. Sometimes it could be as simple as just sending a follow-up email saying, hey, I wanted to confirm that my understanding of what you shared with me is as follows. Anything to indicate that the conversation that you are having with an employee, whether it's an in-person conversation or a conversation that's happening over a Slack or Microsoft Teams channel or in any medium, it's not a conversation with a blank wall. There is reciprocity there. The next step is that the employee is kept in the loop about the next steps from that conversation. So if you're having a check-in with the employee to understand their needs over the past week or project or whatever, based off of that feedback, there should be clear next steps that happen. And from an employee's perspective, they should be kept up to date throughout each of those next steps. One way of thinking about it is if anyone's ordered pizza from Domino's, they have a tracker of each step of the pizza making process. So you know if the toppings have just been added, if it's just been put into the oven. There's never a question about where in the process it is. So there's no black box experience. Similarly, for communication with an employee, they shouldn't feel that they've put in the emotional labor of sharing issues that they have, but then they don't hear anything back for days, weeks, months, or potentially ever. Now, a question that we often get is, what do we do about issues where we don't have a resolution for an employee? So if an employee shares with me like their comp is not high enough, that may not be something that can be addressed immediately or at all. But the important piece in those kinds of scenarios is responding to the employee of, hey, I heard you, and this is why I can or can't do something about it. What that does is maintain trust in the process and in the idea of empathy, and continues the conversation for the next set of dialogues that might be about issues that can actually be resolved. Finally, the most critical piece of this is that it is not a one-off instance. From the employee's perspective, they shouldn't feel that if they miss this conversation now, they never have a chance to come back to it. And so if they haven't shared everything that's on their mind, if they forgot about something, the chance is gone. Instead, this is just one step in an ongoing conversation that's taking place. And that ongoing conversation can happen over a variety of channels, whether that is a consistent series of in-person check-ins that's happening, whether that's a channel that exists on your messaging platform specifically for having dialogue like this. Or for those of you that are at larger organizations, I'll actually show you a little bit later on how we use conversational AI to really scale and automate this kind of conversation. So we've talked a lot about kind of the theory. Let's talk about what empathy in the workplace means from a very tangible perspective. So first is that there should be regular communications to employees that keep them informed on both what's going well and what's not going well, especially as we're in times of change. If that change for now is looking like moving into back to office or to flex work, or if there's changes in company positioning or the organization structure, anything that's happening, whether it's a good or a bad thing, keeping employees in the loop about what's going on. So they're not having to ask questions and poke around to figure out the state of the organization, but they feel as if they are part of it because they're kept up to date. Second is that employees, direct managers, their direct operational leaders should be demonstrating sincere care for employee needs. So as I mentioned earlier, we are seeing that about 95% of employees are now demonstrating sincere care for their employees. So this is more a step of ensuring that that's how your employees are actually perceiving it. Especially now with all this talk about labor shortages and all that, we see that the primary reason why employees are looking to leave is because of burnout and issues with their direct leaders, the managers that they spend every single day with. So it's absolutely critical that the relationship between direct leads and employees is one of empathy and of care. And the final piece is that there is a feedback process that's in place that is trusted from the employee's end to actually affect change, and that's trusted from the leader's end to be a clear set of steps in order to take actions. What we see happen at a lot of organizations is that each individual business unit or each individual team may be handling employee feedback in completely different ways. And there's no standardized process across the company. So from an employee's perspective, it's really a crapshoot as if to whether or not they believe that the process is going to result in change. And from the manager's perspective, it is an easy way to lead to burnout if there's no standardization and they're having to create a whole new process every time. So, how do we actually make sure that we're hearing the voice of every employee? We ran a survey a few months back with about 300 businesses on the state of the remote workplace. What we found from that survey is that on average, managers are spending 29 hours a week in employee communications. So this includes in-person communications, communications they might be doing over email or over a messaging channel, but it's a huge portion of their working hours just in employee communication. Now, what that means is these managers are at high risk for burnout and ultimately for turnover. We see that a solution many companies resort to is employee surveys. But there's several problems that we see with this. First is that surveys alone are not enough. From an employee's perspective, they tend to be distrusted. They are not specific to the day-to-day needs of an employee because they're very generic. They don't create actionable steps for managers to actually take action and improve the issues of their teams. Rather, they're primarily structured on high-level metrics and the kind of data that can be used for strategic decision making, but that doesn't actually get used to impact the day-to-day. Essentially, it's not a tool for your operational leaders. These surveys end up being a tool for HR and for leadership. There's a few recommendations that we have for instead, how do you actually gather employee feedback in a way that matters to the employee and that becomes actionable for the leader? The first is that everything you ask for, the entirety of the feedback and conversations that you're having with employees have to be things that have immediate relevance. And it has to be explained to the employee how participating in this feedback process is going to directly impact and benefit them. What that means is it makes far more sense to have a conversation with an employee about how their current project is going versus much more high level issues surrounding the company as a whole that they may not be thinking on a daily basis. Those kinds of things end up being, one, easier for them to ignore, which reduces your response rates and participation rates, and two, your data quality becomes much worse because these are not things that are at the top of employees' minds. Most of them are not going to sit and think through detailed feedback. They're going to give you quick and easy answers that end up being difficult to act off of. The second very important step is eliminating bureaucracy wherever possible. Many organizations have a very long feedback cycle where you have a set of data that leadership or HR may want to collect. They are instituting a survey or some other process in order to get that from employees. They're collating that data and aggregating it. They're running analysis to get insights out of it. They're creating reports. Those reports are then shared with management, with upper management. Next steps and some actions are decided upon, which are disseminated to middle management. And finally, those actions take place and they impact an employee on the ground. Especially at large enterprises, this kind of feedback cycle we found on average takes about 1 to 1.5 years, which from an employee's perspective, they're never going to tie the fact that the feedback they gave a year ago resulted in this change. In fact, that employee may not even be with the organization. Instead, what we recommend with the companies we work with is having as direct and team-based feedback as possible. So where the feedback process is going from an employee to their direct manager, then back to the employee with the response. And a way to do this is by identifying and committing to single communication channels. So rather than creating an environment which may feel very open of like, hey, employee, whenever you want to share something with me, reach out. You can grab me in the hallways. You can email me. You can message me on Slack. It becomes too much and unclear what communication belongs where. Instead, have one single channel where employees know, like, okay, if I need to raise an issue about my work environment or about issues on my project or whatever, I know that I go to this specific Slack channel or Microsoft Teams channel, and that's where I report it. The final piece, and the one that we often see companies balk at a little bit, is have a immediate response. What that means is respond to the employee feedback within 48 hours and have a next step to employee issues within 2 weeks. Now, I know this can sound very aggressive, especially if you're dealing with more structural kinds of issues that require bigger change. There's a few recommendations that we have. First is you can accelerate your timelines, one, by eliminating the bureaucracy, having more team-based cycles. Two, by engaging employees in the solution building process. So actually crowdsourcing suggestions for improvement from them, which not only makes them feel more engaged, but also gets you next steps, which you know are kind of guaranteed to be popular among the team. And the last piece that I'll recommend here is you don't have to completely resolve an employee's issue 100% within this timeline. The important piece is that the employee sees there's a next step being taken. So within 2 days, they hear, hey, I heard you, we're going to think about it and continue to update you throughout the process. Then within a couple of weeks, there's outreach again saying either, hey, issue is resolved, or hey, this is the program that we are starting to implement based off of what's been reported, or hey, we know this is an issue that's important to you. These are the reasons why we're not able to take immediate action on it, which again, ensures that there's trust maintained in the process, even if that specific employee need is not met. So let's talk about what are the kinds of questions that we should be asking. The first thing to know is that employee needs are rapidly changing. So employee needs have always been unique and fast changing. We've seen that to be much more the case in this past year. And while some of that change may have been unique to the pandemic and working from home, in general, we're seeing employee culture change at a much faster rate. And we expect to see that trend to continue. For example, you can see here the change that we had over a month's period of time, where in April of last year, job security was #1 issue. In May of last year, it wasn't even in the top 7 or 8. What all this means is that we are at a very pivotal point for the employee experience, where employee needs are changing at a rapid pace, where work from home is here to stay, or at least flex work is going to be a major aspect. And we need a two-way dialogue between employees and leaders in a world where we can't expect to always just have that water cooler conversation. There needs to be a standardized process from understanding and acting on employee needs. This is why we created Weave. Weave is an employee engagement platform built with what we call empathetic AI. We focus specifically on empowering people leaders to rapidly understand and address employee needs at scale. We find the at scale part is the real difficult piece for larger organizations. That's why our solution is based on a conversational AI chatbot who we call Kim. Kim is an always available resource for employees. She will proactively reach out to understand employee needs. She'll also be available 24 hours a day and for employees to voice any needs or issues that they may be having. So this kind of fulfills the purpose of that single point of contact in order for employees to have their issues heard. The second very interesting thing about Kim is that she's got this very unique combination of anonymity plus empathy, which we found builds trust in employees, allows them to be open and candid in their feedback in ways that other automated data gathering processes have not been capable of. So Kim lives on your messaging platform. So she'll talk to employees wherever they're already communicating and fits into their current workflows. That might be on Slack, it might be on Microsoft Teams, it might be over email, it might be over SMS even for employees that don't sit at a computer all day. Ultimately, what we see is that for specific demographics of employees, they get very close with Kim. They feel that they can comfortably share issues that they don't feel comfortable talking directly to leadership. So this obviously we see from our more Gen Z and millennial employees. But interestingly, we also see heavy engagement from your 60 plus, which ends up being our next most responsive group. Ultimately, though, whether or not employees feel that they have some sort of deeper relationship with Kim, the primary goal is that we've created that single point of contact for all employees to voice their needs. Now, as I mentioned, there are two ways in which Kim is interacting with employees. She's reaching out to them proactively, or they are reaching out whenever they have issues they need to escalate. So when Kim is reaching out, the question becomes, how do we know what to talk about? So Kim is able to have conversations around really any topic in the workplace. She comes out of the box with over 100 templates in order to address common employee needs. She's going to use sentiment and emotional analysis to better understand employee needs, to ask relevant follow-up questions. She puts in place the right pipelines to go directly from employees to the operational leaders that can do something about employee feedback. She's able to route employees to resources and tools that are available in your organization. So the kinds of programs that you've already invested in, making sure that employees know about them at the right time. She can automatically identify critical issues. So if employees are reporting, for example, a harassment type issue, something that shouldn't be handled by an automated program, those are things we can automatically flag for and put into escalation flows. Over the course of the conversations, Kim is going to draw a lot of insights and analytics that really give you a proper measurement of ROI and of how having those conversations with employees is making a tangible, direct impact on workplace and on productivity. And finally, Kim facilitates that ongoing engagement without having to take up that manager time, which we already know is being spent so much on employee communications. We're able to take the ongoing engagement, make it into something that is engaging with employees on a regular basis without adding undue pressures on your operational leaders. So I actually want to take a second here to show you what an example of one of these conversations with Kim looks like. So I'm hopping over here into our web chat with Kim. As I mentioned, Kim can integrate into a variety of messaging platforms for the purpose of this demo here. This is our web chat, which is just a secure link that delivers over email. Now, Kim is also aware of my personal scheduling preferences. So she's only going to reach out to me at times that make sense and are not going to be disruptive to my working schedule. And when I'm ready, I can go ahead and jump into this conversation. I can see that she wants to talk about influence and mentorship at my company. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this conversation. And the first question she's got for me is, do you feel like you're included in decisions that impact your work? So I can respond fairly conversationally. I'm just going to say no. Now in the background, Kim is running a couple kinds of natural language processing in order to figure out if there's a correct follow-up question to ask, if there's a resource to provide. In this case, she wants to dive in a little bit deeper and see if this is a trend that I'm experiencing. So I'm going to say, yeah, we have a weekly meeting where everyone is supposed to be able to share their ideas, but it ends up just being a few people that make all the decisions. So my spelling mistakes and whatnot kind of get cleaned up by Kim in the back end. She's also using some emotional and sentiment analysis, in this case, to empathize with me, let me know that this is an area that the organization is actually working on improving and that my thoughts are going to be passed along. And again, a relevant follow-up question based off of the information that I shared is, what are some ideas that I've had that I wish are going to be considered more seriously? So I'm going to put myself in the shoes of, let's say, a salesperson, and I'll say we should be logging all outgoing emails with customers in our CRM. Now, again, Kim is using some forms of intelligent topic analysis as well, so she understands that I'm kind of talking about how we do our client management, and asking if there's anything else I want to share. I'm just going to say no for now. Now, this last question just got for me is, if there's anyone in management or leadership that I have that advocates for me, that I go to for advice or mentorship. I'm going to say, kinda, I go to Jen, but she's often too busy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Kim is also able to intelligently recommend resources and initiatives that your organization may have. For example, in this case, the organization had recently launched a mentorship program where employees can get paired with leaders who can help advocate for them. Based off of my response that I've given here, Kim's determined that this is the appropriate time to recommend this particular resource to me. Ultimately, what we want to do is the initiatives and programs that you're already investing in should be used. They should be, employees should be made aware about them. And versus your standard program rollouts where you're just sending massive blasts to employees saying, hey, by the way, we have these new resources. Kim ensures that employees hear about that resource at the time where it directly matters to them, and it's not something that just gets lost in their inboxes. Now, last thing is she's kind of checking if there's anything else that I want to share. So I want to take this opportunity actually to show you some of the other features that Kim has. So it's not just a one-way dialogue. We often get questions like, what's happening with my data? Is this an anonymous experience, et cetera? Those are things that Kim is able to understand and give me in context answers to kind of build trust with the employee in this process before she returns back to her original question. Now, as I mentioned, one other area where this is critically important is for issues that shouldn't be handled by a chatbot. So let's say I say something like, I'm being bullied, or I'm facing a harassment issue, or some other kind of scenario that Kim shouldn't handle. These are things that Kim can automatically flag for, put up into an escalation flow so that it can be contacted by someone as quickly as possible. Now, you'll notice my entire interaction with Kim, we put a lot of effort into ensuring to employees that this is a anonymous process, their data is an aggregate, there's no names attached, et cetera. In this particular case of escalations, I have the option of whether or not I want to share my contact information. Otherwise, it's just some information about like my department and other areas that will be escalated, so some sort of investigation could be started if need be. So I've kind of gone through very quickly some of the capabilities of the chatbot. If you have any questions on how this works, feel free to ping them into the chat and I'll make sure to get to them. For the time being, while any questions come in, I'm just going to jump back. Now, at the end of the conversations that Kim has, we do surface a lot of data in terms of employee emotion and sentiment, in terms of the topics that are most critical, the areas that need to be focused on, what kinds of issues there needs to be next steps and action. But the key piece to remember, whether or not you're using a tool like ours, is analytics themselves don't equate to improvement. We see companies fall into this trap quite a lot, which is they run some sort of data gathering exercise. They end up getting a lot of really cool analytics out of it. They do a bunch of analysis, they pull out a bunch of insights, and then kind of feel that the job is done. And there's no clear next steps taken. So from the employee's perspective, nothing actually happened. The way we resolve that is by having a very clear path to improvement. And again, whether or not you're using a tool like Weave, this is a process that we recommend you follow. This path starts with having conversations with employees to understand their issues and their needs. Next is broadcasting back and indicating, hey, we actually heard you. And this is something that is a feature within Weave, so operational leaders can very easily send broadcasts back through CAM to acknowledge employee feedback, but this is something that can be done manually as well. Next is engage employees in the solution building process. Crowdsource suggestions for improvement from them so that they know that they're not dealing with the black box, so that operational leaders have a set of actions that kind of kick off their action planning and resolution workflows. And finally, continue to check in over time to say, hey, you told me about this issue. You even gave me some suggestions on how to improve it. Do you feel like the issue is resolved or not? And what that does is kind of give you real-time updates on employee issues. It tells you what the overall ROI and impact of the employee feedback process is, and it ensures that the dialogue with employees is continuous. Ultimately, the process that you're trying to build is, from an employee's perspective, they know if they engage, they're going to see rapid resolution to their issues. And from a leader's perspective, they know that they never have to ask what's next. It's always very clear how to get from an employee issue into resolution of it. Okay, so I'll check and see if, again, if you have any questions, feel free to ping them into the chat. Otherwise, if you are interested in learning more about Weave or trying out Kim for yourself for free, you can visit us at weave.ai/meet Kim. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. I'll go ahead and give you back the rest of this hour.